Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about Bilt Hamber Autofoam, Touchless, and PIR. Now, there's been some good videos about PIR out there, and it is a very useful tool when you're using something like a foam cannon. It's a lot of times more of a necessary tool. We're going to get into why that is, because I think a lot of the issues around PIR is people don't understand the why you're doing it, why you calculate it, because products like these tell you to dilute them based on that figure, and they're very good, which you'll see later. But the people get frustrated with PIR because they have to do calculations, and yes, you do have to do a little bit of work to figure it out. There's a couple ways you can do it. One of them is clunky but simple. The other one is elegant but math related. So that's the give or take. I'll link below the math related video. Steve Pearson did a good video on it, which I've watched, and it's a great way to do it. But if you don't want to go that route, then you can also do it another way, which we'll get to in just a sec. But the why is PIR calculates and accounts for all the variables in your setup until you get to this point. It tells you the percentage of product here. And that's how these work. They want a certain percentage of chemical coming out of this end. So you need to account for the volume, the flow, and the dilution in here, right? Like this mixture plus this mixture equals whatever. And the way you set the knob, what kind of cannon you have, what kind of pressure washer you have, they all affect that. So they can't tell you to use 100 mils to 900 mils water, because depending on your foam cannon, depending on your pressure washer, it won't be the same amount of chemical coming out the tip. That's why you use PIR. The other reason that you should know your PIR is that you have a ceiling of how strong you can make these chemicals. If you go too high, go over that recommended range, I'm sure lots of people have done it in a pinch for various reasons, but then you have to change your working conditions and your process if you're going to go outside the box like that. If you're using this setup and you're going outside that and you don't know it, you may run into issues with staining, with damage, things like that. So knowing where your maximum is when you're using something like a foam cannon is very handy to use, to know when you're using strong chemicals like these. I don't want to go over, I usually use 100 mils to 900 in my cannon. This particular setup, I have done the math earlier today. I always knew it was roughly, I was in that rough 1%, but I've now confirmed it. So I put 500 mils of water in here, and it took 4.45 liters of water to take out that 500 mils. So 4.95 liters total in a bucket to flush this dry, including that 500 mils. So 4.45 plus the 500, 4.95. So if I did a full liter, it would be 9.9 liters to empty this liter. And that's 9.9 is including this. It's that plus this equals 9.9. So that means for this cannon, if I want to make my solution and make a 1 full liter, I need 198 milliliters of this to be concentrated chemical, one of these. That will give me 2%, which is the ceiling for this. 99 mils, which is what I use, is 100 mils, gives me 1%. And I usually use 1%. I usually find with Autofoam, that's enough. It's nothing, it's not stripping everything crazy hard, but it's more than enough for what I need. And that makes this very economical, because this is 5 liters. So that's how that works. All you got to do is fill it to 500 or a liter. I mean, it's easier to do it to 500 because then you don't have to measure as much water. If you have a bucket that has fairly accurate measurements on the side, you don't even have to decant anything like I had to do. And you can just run it until it's done. take that total volume and times that total volume by the percentage you need, and that's your PIR. So again, based on that, and then just scale it. So if I did, 500 mils, I would use 50 milliliters of product to get 1%. If I'm doing a full liter, then I use 100 mils in that liter. So pretty easy to do. It's not the end of the world. Measuring cups are cheap at the dollar store. Buckets are cheap at Home Depot. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but that is very important when you're using strong chemicals, to know how much is coming out of here. It's pretty easy to stay under it, but if you're trying to go high, if you have a really disgusting car that you want to clean hard, it is important to know where that ceiling is with your setup, because everyone's setup will be different. So the manufacturers are urging you to figure out what your setup is so that you can use these chemicals safely. That's why PIR is important. If you're using a pump sprayer, it's just whatever the volume is times the percentage of whatever you want. So like this is, oopsie doodle. This is 0.5 to 2% PIR. So if you wanted to use it at 0.5, you would simply times this volume by 0.5%, and that would tell you how much chemical you need to put in with your water. There's no additional water. This is the mixture. The problem with foam cannons is you're adding water to this water and you're diluting it further. So you need to know that figure. But yeah, moving on from that, now we're going to get into the actual comparison in this video, which is me comparing this Touchless, which is the newest version, and Autofoam, which is my gold standard. I've been using forever. So I borrowed my neighbor's car because mine have been too clean to do something like this. You'll see there's 2 towels here, and I'll zoom in and I'll do an overlay of it. But basically, we used 1% PIR for both these in this foam cannon. It was piss and rain, just an FYI. So the product could have dwelled until it rained itself off, but I gave each of them about 4 minutes, roughly, based on my watch, 4 minutes to dwell, and then I pressure washed them off in a similar fashion. One on one side, one on the other. I'd used this rag to do one swipe to determine how dirty it was, because it was equally dirty on both sides. So I swiped one end of it to get my dirty. And then after rinsing Touchless, I swiped the other end of the same rag to see how much dirt was left. And I got a new cloth to do a swipe on the Autofoam side to see how much dirt was on that. And then we'll look at those after. But in the meantime, enjoy the footage of them being foamed and rinsed off. Note, this stuff at 1% foams much more than Autofoam. It was quite a bit richer, and it looked like more was coming off of the tires, and I saw more brown on the ground. But again, there's more foam to sort of highlight it, so I don't know if it really cleaned more. I believe it did, but it seemed, I could see it more in the ground just because the ground was white from foam, whereas the Autofoam side, it's more of a runny mixture. It still works well, it's just, it's not a thick foam. So anyway, enough rambling. Let's get to that, and then we'll come in for the conclusion. Okay, so you've seen the results. Again, I'm going to hold this up. I'm going to overlay a bunch of footage of these cloths, but fairly dirty on the door there. This is dried out now since earlier today. And the other end has the touchless side, which again I will put on the screen. There's a little bit left, but not much. You can see this is the dirty side. This is the rinse side. There's a little bit left, but it was faint. And again, the car stayed wet all day, so I couldn't really go out and do a dry check. If I hold up the Autofoam sample, it looks ever so slightly worse. Just ever. Not enough for me, personally, to step down to a 1 liter thing, even if I could use it at 0.5%, use half as much. That's still 2 liters equivalent of Autofoam, which I get 5 liters of. And I can ramp this up to 5%. This ramps up from 0.5 to 2. So they're kind of similar, right? They're just doing like that kind of a shift. So it's interesting. Yeah, I'll do the pricing math on the screen. I haven't looked it up, but I'll put a comment there if I have any thoughts on it now. Comment, okay. I don't have issues with Autofoam. It does what I need it to do. I mix it into spray bottles to clean wheels and tires. It's like a mild, like in between wheel cleaning. I don't buy dedicated alloy alkaline wheel cleaners. I just use that. I use it for cleaning tires. It does just enough to get the tire clean without destroying and drying out the rubber. I use it for a lot of things. Of course, ranked reviews. So I'll always have to have it now because of ranked reviews. But I have no issues with it. And Touchless cleaned really, really well. The only annoying thing about Touchless is it's thicker. It's not the thickest thing in the world, but it is quite a bit thicker. And when you're just mixing it up, especially foam cannon mixing, like, you know, you got to pour in that right amount. It was a little annoying. So if you're dumping it straight into the cannon, that's okay. But if you're working with smaller, you know, cannon quantity, you're doing 500, there's no 50 mil marking, right? So you have to measure 50 somewhere else, and then you got to thoroughly rinse that into it. So if you mix it up, if you know what your mixture needs to be, mix a bulk a bigger container of it and just pour it straight in. Much easier for you. But yeah, I didn't mind it. I thought it was good. But Autofoam coming in 5 liters and still using a similar amount and cleaning as much as I need it to clean, it does the job for me. I don't need the extra muscle that Touchless has, plus the smaller container size. So yeah, so that's that. PIR and Bilt Hamber's pre-washes. They're both great. If you can't get one, but you can get the other, you'll be fine. They're excellent. I've never had issues with them. I've never had issues with the cannon after using them. Again, I have really good water here, but yeah, PIR though is very important. If you're using a foam cannon and you're using strong detergents, you really should go spend the 5 to 10 minutes it takes to calculate your PIR and figure it out, because the last thing you want to do is get it real wrong and damage something. Especially if it's using in the hotter weather when things dry out too quickly and you're using a really strong concentration, you could be in trouble. So figure it out, know what you're doing, probably save product because you could be overusing it or, you know, whatever. Or if you're not getting results and it turns out you're underutilizing, then there you go. So yeah, just do the math, figure it out, know what your system needs. It's not a complicated process. So anyway, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.